Madam Elizabeth was renowned throughout Nigeria as one of the wealthiest and most influential women in the country. She owned a prominent shipping and marine engineering company named Ocean Stars Enterprises, famous for its excellence, reliability, and exceptional service. Beyond her considerable wealth, Madam Elizabeth was deeply admired for her wisdom, generosity, and compassionate heart. She treated her employees kindly and was involved in numerous charitable activities that benefited countless communities. However, despite all her successes, nothing made Madam Elizabeth prouder than her only son, Kelvin. Kelvin was studying marine engineering abroad, excelling academically and highly respected by both his peers and professors. He was tall, handsome, and charismatic, with smooth dark skin, warm expressive eyes, and an easygoing smile that instantly put people at ease. Kelvin was fully aware that many young ladies were interested in him, primarily because of his mother's wealth and prestige. But Kelvin was determined to find a woman who would love him genuinely, someone who saw him beyond his family's wealth and his mother's prominent status. One peaceful evening, Madam Elizabeth phoned Kelvin, her voice bright with excitement. After their discussion, she said, "My dear son, do you still remember our agreement? You promised to start a family once you graduate." Kelvin chuckled softly, responding with warmth. "I remember, Mom, and I promise I will find someone truly special when I come back home." Madam Elizabeth laughed gently. "You know, Kelvin, I have already spotted two remarkable young women who work in our company. They are both intelligent, hardworking, respectful, and genuinely kind-hearted. Either will make an excellent life partner." Kelvin playfully raised his eyebrow. "Are you selecting my future wife already, Mom?" Madam Elizabeth laughed again. "I am only guiding you, my dear. The final decision will always be yours." After the conversation ended, Kelvin began to consider a unique plan. He thought to himself, what if I pretend to be a poor employee, perhaps a cleaner at Mom's company? This way, I could clearly see who genuinely likes me without knowing my true identity. Few days later, Madam Elizabeth decided it was time to have a private discussions with two of her trusted young employees. She called Abigail first. Sitting gracefully in her grand office adorned with polished wooden furniture and golden curtains, Madam Elizabeth pressed her intercom and said, "Please ask Abigail to come to my office now." Moments later, Abigail entered quietly, her steps modest and her attire neat and professional. "Good afternoon, Madam Elizabeth," she greeted politely. "Good afternoon, my dear Abigail," Madam Elizabeth replied warmly. Motioning for her to sit, Abigail sat carefully, folding her hands on her laps. Madam Elizabeth smiled at her and began, "Abigail, I want to personally thank you for your unwavering dedication to Ocean Star Enterprises. Your intelligence, attention to detail, and hardworking spirit had impressed me deeply." Abigail blushed slightly, lowering her gaze out of humility. "More than that," Madam Elizabeth continued, her voice gentle and full of admiration, "your humility, respectfulness, and decency stand out in a world where many rush to show off. You carry yourself with so much grace and kindness." Abigail's heart warmed at Madam Elizabeth's words, and she smiled shyly. Madam Elizabeth leaned forward slightly, her eyes twinkling. "My son Kelvin is completing his marine engineering degree abroad and will soon return to Nigeria. I have watched you closely and believe you could be a wonderful match for him." Abigail's eyes widened slightly, surprised at the unexpected turn of the conversation. "I am not forcing anything, my dear," Madam Elizabeth assured her. "I simply want you to be yourself. If his heart chooses you, it will fill my heart with joy." "Thank you very much, ma," Abigail replied softly, her voice sincere. I promise to remain true to myself. Good, Madam Elizabeth said, smiling warmly. You may return to your duties now, Abigail. Abigail stood respectfully and exited the office quietly, her heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. Next, Madam Elizabeth decided it was time to call Michelle into her office. She sat behind her large polished mahogany desk, her hands folded neatly as she pressed the intercom. Please ask Michelle to come to my office, she instructed. A few minutes later, Michelle entered, her steps confident and her appearance immaculate. Good afternoon, Madam Elizabeth, she said with a dazzling smile. Good afternoon, Michelle, Madam Elizabeth replied warmly. Please have a seat. Michelle sat gracefully, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. Madam Elizabeth studied her for a moment, then began. Michelle, I want to personally acknowledge the hard work and dedication you have shown in Ocean Star Enterprises. Your organizational skill, intelligence, and ability to handle tasks effectively had not gone unnoticed. Michelle beamed with pride. Madam Elizabeth continued, her tone kind yet deliberate. Also, let me say you are an exceptional, beautiful young woman. You carry yourself with grace and confidence, qualities that are rare and admirable. Michelle blushed slightly, sitting straighter in her chair. Then Madam Elizabeth leaned forward slightly and added with a knowing smile, My son Kelvin will be returning from abroad soon. He's graduating as a top marine engineer. I have been observing a few of our young women here, and I believe you could be a wonderful match for him. Michelle's heart skipped a beat. She listened eagerly as Madam Elizabeth concluded. I am not forcing anything, my dear. I only ask that you continue to be yourself. If his heart chooses you, it will make me very happy. Thank you so much, ma, Michelle replied, struggling to hide her excitement. She stood up gracefully. I promise to make you proud, ma. Good, Madam Elizabeth smiled warmly. You may go now. Michelle walked out of the office, her mind already racing with dreams of becoming the wife of the future CEO. Michelle's excitement was immediate. Her mind raced with the vivid images of her future life. She imagined herself standing proudly beside Kelvin, adorned in designer clothes, sparkling jewelries, and the most expensive shoe money could buy. She saw herself hosting lavish parties, arriving at events in luxury cars, and living in a grand mansion that would make everyone in her hometown jealous. In her thought, she would lift her entire family out of poverty, placing them in mansions and showering them with wealth beyond their dreams. Michelle fantasized about walking through the office halls with even more authority, issuing commands without questions. She vowed to deal ruthlessly with anyone who had ever dared to look down on her, planning to fire those who disrespected her and promote only those who would bow to her will. Her pride inflated with every passing second, and she carried herself around the office like a queen, already sitting on her throne, believing nothing could stand in her way. When Kelvin finally returned home, Madam Elizabeth was waiting at the airport, her heart bubbling with excitement and overwhelming joy. The moment she caught sight of her son emerging from the arrival gate, she couldn't hold back her emotions. She hurried towards him, her arms wide open, and pulled him into a tight, loving hug. My son, my pride, my joy, she exclaimed, tears of happiness filling her eyes. You are finally home. You have made the happiest mother on earth. Kelvin laughed warmly, hugging her back tightly. It's good to be home, Mom. I've missed you so much. Holding his hands as they walked to the car, Madam Elizabeth whispered excitedly, I kept your arrival a secret from everyone at Ocean Star. Nobody knows you are back. It's our little surprise. Kelvin grinned mischievously. Perfect, Mom. It will make my plan even better. As the driver pulled away from the airport, Madam Elizabeth chatted happily, almost unable to contain her joy. You know, Kelvin, Now that you have graduated, I can finally begin my second dream, retiring peacefully and becoming a full-time grandmother. Kelvin busted into laughter. Mom, you are already planning grandchildren? Of course, Madam Elizabeth replied, laughing along. I am not getting any younger, and my arms are itching to rock babies. Once you marry, I will resign completely and spend my days pampering my grandchildren. Kelvin shook his head in amusement. Well, I better find the right woman then. Speaking of that, Madam Elizabeth said, her tone turning playful. I already introduced two lovely young women to the idea. They work at Ocean Star. Smart, decent, beautiful. But she added, tapping his arm gently, the final choice is yours. Kelvin chuckled. Thank you for trusting me, Mom. They reached home and sat together in the cozy living room. Over fresh fruit juice and small chops, Kelvin detailed his plan to disguise himself as a humble cleaner named Emeka, to see for himself who would love him without knowing his real identity. Madam Elizabeth listened carefully, nodding with approval. That's my boy, she proudly said. Wise like your father, it is better to be loved for your heart than your wealth. Exactly, Kelvin agreed. Please, Mom, treat me like a staff member when I start. Don't act like you know me. Madam Elizabeth placed her hand dramatically over her heart and promised, cross my heart, I will play along. It will be our little drama. And trust me, I am ready for it. They both busted into laughter, sharing a deep bond strengthened by love, trust and excitement for the adventure that awaited them. On Kelvin's first day disguised as Emeka, he wore a faded blue uniform, carried a worn-out cleaning bucket, and held an old broom in his hand. His shoes were simple rubber sandals, and a plain face cap covered part of his forehead. He deliberately kept his posture humble, moving quietly like someone used to being overlooked. Most employees hurried past him, too busy with their work to even notice him. Some barely glanced his way, treating him like he was invincible. But not Abigail. As she approached, Abigail slowed down, studying the new face. With a warm, polite smile, she said, "Good morning. Are you the new cleaner?" Kelvin, surprised by her kindness, quickly adjusted his cap and replied humbly, "Yes, ma. My name is Emeka." Abigail chuckled softly, a light musical sound. "No need for ma. I am Abigail. Welcome to Ocean Star Enterprises." She extended her hand casually, without a trace of pride or hesitation. Kelvin touched quickly, wiped his hand on his trousers, and shook hers lightly, trying to hide how stunned he was by her natural humility. "Thank you very much, Abigail," he said, his heart warming. Abigail smiled again and added, "If you need anything or get confused about the building, you can always ask me. Ocean Star is a big place." "Thank you, Abigail," Kelvin responded genuinely. They exchanged a few more light words about the building layout and where the cleaners usually store their equipment. Abigail pointed him towards the break room and wished him a great day before hurrying off to her department. Kelvin stood still for a moment, watching her leave with graceful step, her neat appearance and gentle spirit lingering in his mind. As he picked up his cleaning bucket again, he thought to himself with a smile, she didn't see a billionaire's son, she only saw a fellow human being. If this is how she is naturally, I believe I have already found gold. He tightened his grip on the broom. With new excitement, his secret mission had only just begun. But already, his heart was more hopeful than ever. Michelle, however, strutted past him without even sparing a glance, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. She held a thick file tightly in one hand, heading straight towards her colleague's desk near the reception. As she dropped the file with an exaggerated sigh, she leaned close to her colleague and asked in a loud whisper, "Since when did we start hiring male cleaners in this company?" Her voice dripped with mockery, her brow raised in disdain. Her colleague shrugged. trying to ignore Michelle's tone. But Michelle continued, giggling sarcastically. Out of all the jobs in the world, he chose to be a cleaner. How pathetic. She flipped her hair dramatically and laughed loudly, drawing attention from others nearby. Kelvin, who was mopping quietly a few feet away, overheard every word. His heart pinched slightly, but he remained calm, focusing on his work. As he moved closer to mop the area where Michelle was standing, he politely said, "Excuse me, ma. Ma, please, can I mop here?" Michelle recoiled dramatically, stepping back with an exaggerated expression of disgust. "Young man, watch where you are swinging that filthy mop. Don't you dare touch my shoes," she snapped sharply, waving her hand as if to shoo him away like a stray dog. Kelvin simply nodded silently, moving to another section without a word. Inside, he sighed deeply, thinking to himself, if only she knew who she was talking to. But this is exactly why I needed this test. He continued mopping, his face calm, his heart already making silent decisions about what he had witnessed. Within a short time, Michelle's attitude drastically changed. She began walking with exaggerated pride, loudly boasting in front of co-workers. "Look, everyone here better start showing me some respect. I will soon marry Madam Elizabeth's son, and things will be different around here." Michelle's arrogant laughter and dismissive hand gestures shocked her colleagues. She frequently snapped at junior staff, belittling their appearance and status, creating discomfort among the workers, who began murmuring quietly about her newfound arrogance. One afternoon, Michelle spotted Abigail at the photocopy machine and walked up to her with a confident sway of her hips. Her voice was dripping with sarcasm as she said, "I saw you the other day entering Madam Elizabeth's office." Abigail turned and looked at her calmly. "Yes, I was there," she replied politely. Michelle smirked, folding her arms arrogantly. "I know exactly what the meeting was all about. Don't play innocent. You think you can have a chance, right?" She sneered. "Let me warn you, Abigail. Competing with me for a man like Kelvin is dangerous." Abigail raised her eyebrows slightly, trying to understand where all the hostility was coming from. Michelle leaned in a little closer, whispering mockingly, "We are not in the same league. You should better know your place. When Kelvin marries me, you and your likes will be sweeping the corridors, while I sit in a big office issuing orders." Abigail took a deep breath, holding her calm. She smiled softly and said, "Michelle, if Kelvin is meant for you, you won't need to fight for him or mock anyone else. Time will tell." Michelle scoffed loudly, flipping her hair as she turned on her heels and strutted away, leaving Abigail standing there, her heart steady, her spirit untouched by Michelle's prideful words. Abigail, composed and gentle as ever, calmly replied, "Michelle, Kelvin hasn't even arrived yet. Let him make his own choice." Kelvin discreetly observed their interactions and became increasingly disappointed with Michelle's arrogance, but was deeply impressed by Abigail's consistent humility and kindness. One sweaty afternoon, as Kelvin mopped the floors near the office cafeteria, Abigail noticed him sweating heavily under the hot sun. She approached him with her unusual gentle smile, holding a cool bottle of water. "You look very tired, Emeka. Take this and rest a little," she said kindly. Kelvin, touched profoundly by her genuine care, smiled broadly and accepted the water with joy. "Thank you so much, Abigail. God bless you," he said sincerely. Abigail chuckled softly. "Have you eaten today?" she asked with concern. Kelvin shook his head shyly. "No, ma, I am fine with the water." "Are you sure?" Abigail pressed gently. "I can buy you lunch if you want." Kelvin's heart warmed even more, but he politely declined. "No need, thank you, ma. This water is more than enough for me." She nodded kindly and left him to rest. As she turned to go, Kelvin watched her, feeling amazed. He thought to himself, this lady has a pure heart. She is different. Later that day, when work was over, Kelvin gathered his courage and approached Abigail shyly. "Please, Abigail, can I ask for a small favor?" She smiled warmly. Of course, what is it? Can you give me a lift home today? My legs are tired, he asked humbly. Without hesitation, Abigail agreed. Of course, you can come with me. When it was time to leave, Kelvin hopped into her small old car, a simple Toyota that showed signs of years of use, but was clean and neat. They chatted casually as she drove, talking about the traffic, work, and little jokes that made the ride lively. When they reached a rough, unpleasant part of town, filled with old buildings and dusty roads, Kelvin pretended it was his stop. Thank you so much, Abigail. I live around here, he said, pointing to a rundown street. Abigail smiled kindly, showing no judgment or surprise. All right then, take care. See you tomorrow. Kelvin waved as she drove off, feeling deeply moved by her humility. The next day at work, Abigail became even friendlier. She greeted him cheerfully in the morning and even asked how he was feeling. Their friendship grew stronger naturally. In Kelvin's heart, he already knew she was the one. Her kindness, humility, and pure spirit had won him over completely. But he wasn't ready to reveal his true identity yet. He wanted to be sure of everything. Every evening at home, he gave Madame Elizabeth detailed feedback about everything that happened. Madame Elizabeth would laugh, clap her hands in excitement, and they both enjoyed every moment of the unfolding story like a secret joyful adventure. Meanwhile, Michelle grew more hostile, openly insulting Kelvin one morning when he politely greeted her. Who gave you the right to speak to me, you poor cleaner? Keep your distance, she snapped viciously. Kelvin responded calmly but firmly. Why do you treat me this way? Michelle glared at him with disdain. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She snapped sharply. Oh, please don't act innocent. You stained my expensive designer shoe the other day with that disgusting mop of yours. Kelvin quickly bowed his head slightly and said, I am very sorry about that, ma. Michelle scoffed loudly, flipping her hair back. Save your apology for someone who cares. I don't talk to riffraffs like you. She looked him up and down with disgust. If my husband, the main CEO of this company, finds out I am even wasting words on you, he'll be so ashamed of me. She stepped closer, lowering her voice but filled with venom. Don't worry, soon I will be your boss wife, and the first thing I will do is to sack you without blinking. Kelvin, maintaining his calm, smiled faintly and said, But ma, you aren't married to the CEO yet. That sentence hit Michelle like a slap. Her face turned red with anger. She let out a loud gasp, almost choking with rage. Then she quickly turned around. Her high heels made loud noises on the shiny floor as she marched to Madame Elizabeth's office. Bursting in without knocking, she raised her voice in frustration. Madame Elizabeth, that useless cleaner has insulted me. He must be sacked immediately. Startled, Madame Elizabeth raised her head from her paperwork and frowned deeply. Michelle, Madame Elizabeth said sternly, what kind of behavior is this? How dare you burst into my office without permission? Never do that again. Michelle immediately bowed her head, realizing her mistake. I am sorry, ma, she mumbled. Trying to recover, Michelle continued boldly. But ma, that useless cleaner insulted me today. I demand that he be fired immediately. Madame Elizabeth leaned back slowly in her chair, her face calm but firm. Michelle, I will not entertain such demands. You are not in any position to sack anyone in this company. Michelle was baffled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But ma, she tried again, but Madame Elizabeth shook her head. No buts. I have heard enough. Return to your work immediately, and let this be the last time you barge into my office disrespectfully. That evening at home, Kelvin shared all his observations with his mother. They both concluded that Michelle had shown her true character, while Abigail had exhibited genuine humility and kindness. One quiet evening after work, Kelvin asked Abigail to take a walk with him. As they walked down the garden path behind the office building, Kelvin stopped and looked at her kindly. Abigail, he said softly, I deeply like you. I am just a cleaner, but my feelings are real. Would you accept me as I am?" Abigail's eyes lit up with surprise and joy. She smiled, but then her smile faded a little. She looked down at her fingers and held her breath for a moment. "Kelvin," she said slowly, "I am really happy you asked me out. I like you too, but I need to tell you something first." Kelvin looked worried. "What is it, Abigail?" Abigail looked up. "Madam Elizabeth once told me to wait for her son. She said he would come from abroad and that she wanted me to meet him. I promised her I would wait and see if I could love him. But now I have fallen in love with you. I don't want to wait anymore." Kelvin was quiet. Abigail continued, "I will go and tell Madam Elizabeth the truth. I will let her know I no longer want to wait for her son. I want to be with you." Kelvin held her hand. "Thank you for being honest with me, Abigail." The next morning, Abigail walked nervously into Madam Elizabeth's office. She stood in front of her desk and spoke in a calm voice. "Good morning, ma," she began. "I came to say something important." Madam Elizabeth looked up from her papers. "Go ahead, my dear." Abigail took a deep breath. "Ma, I know I promised to wait for your son, but I found someone else. I am very sorry if this disappoints you. I didn't plan it, but it happened. I hope you will understand." To Abigail's surprise, Madam Elizabeth smiled warmly. "My dear, love cannot be forced. I am happy for you. If you found love, hold it tight. You've done nothing wrong." Abigail's heart was full of relief and joy. "Thank you, ma," she said with a grateful smile. That same evening, she met with Emeka, the man she had recently grown close to. She smiled at him and said, "I have spoken to Madam Elizabeth. I have chosen you. I want to be with you." Emeka smiled back and gently took her hand. But what Abigail didn't know was that Emeka was actually Madam Elizabeth's son, the same one she had been asked to wait for. Overjoyed, Kelvin and Abigail agreed to keep their relationship private to avoid office gossip, especially from Michelle. Every morning, Abigail would flash him a warm smile and greet him kindly. "Good morning, Emeka," as if he were just another staff member. Kelvin would tip his cap shyly and respond, "Good morning, ma," playing along perfectly. Sometimes during lunch breaks, they would exchange brief glances with an unspoken affection. Careful not to draw attention, Abigail would occasionally leave an extra bottle of cold water on his cleaning trolley, pretending it was by mistake, and Kelvin would find small ways to sweep around her desk longer than necessary, just to be near her without raising suspicion. They mastered the art of silent communication. A wink here, a secret smile there, all unnoticed by the prying eyes of their colleagues. Their friendship grew deeper with each passing day, and though they longed to spend more time together openly, they valued the secrecy that kept their bond safe from gossip and jealousy. In his heart, Kelvin was certain she was the one, but he remained patient, savoring every moment of their hidden connection, while sharing every delightful update with Madam Elizabeth at home. Together, mother and son laughed and marveled at the beautiful story unfolding before them. 2 weeks later, Madam Elizabeth called an urgent company-wide meeting, surprising everyone. As the employees gathered in the spacious conference hall, the atmosphere buzzed with curiosity and excitement. Madam Elizabeth stood elegantly at the front of the room, beautifully dressed. With a warm but commanding voice, she addressed them. "My dear Ocean Star family, today is a very special day for me personally and for this company." She paused, letting her words settle. The room grew silent. "First," she continued, "I want to thank each and every one of you for your years of loyalty, hard work, and dedication. Without you, Ocean Star Enterprises will not be what it is today." There was a soft round of applause. Madam Elizabeth smiled and added, I am proud of the discipline, the innovation, and the integrity that runs through the veins of this company. You have made me proud, not just as your leader, but as someone who considers you family." The employee smiled and nodded, feeling the sincerity in her words. Among them, Michelle's excitement was uncontrollable. She clapped the loudest, her hands stinging from the force. She quickly leaned towards her best friend seated beside her and whispered excitedly, "It seems my husband is finally back." Her eyes sparkled with ambition as she added, "I can't wait to meet him and let him slide the ring onto my finger. Very soon, I will be the new queen of Ocean Star." She giggled, straightening her hair proudly, already daydreaming about her future status. "Today," she continued with a twinkle in her eyes, "I am here to introduce someone very important. He is not just any worker. He is my only son, Kelvin. And today, I proudly present him as the new CEO of Ocean Star Enterprises." Gasps of shock and amazement filled the hall as Kelvin, dressed impeccably in a fine tailored suit, stepped forward confidently and stood beside his mother. Abigail's heart raced with joy and disbelief. Michelle stood frozen, her mouth slightly open as realization crashed down on her. Madam Elizabeth beamed with pride, clapping her hands together gently as she watched her son command the room with quiet strength. The entire staff gasped as Kelvin stepped forward confidently. Abigail was stunned, her mouth slightly parted as she stared at him in disbelief. For a moment, her mind froze, and then she whispered under her breath, "Emeka." Kelvin turned to her with a sweet, reassuring smile that warmed her heart immediately, silently confirming everything. Abigail's heart pounded against her chest, a wave of emotion flooding her: shock, amazement, joy, and a deep sense of pride. She clutched her chest lightly, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude that the humble cleaner she had cared for was indeed the true heir to Ocean Star Enterprises. Meanwhile, Michelle, humiliated and shocked beyond words, quietly slipped out of the gathering, her dreams crumbling into dust. Kelvin stepped forward confidently, adjusting the microphone with a calm smile. He surveyed the faces in the room and began, "Good morning, my dear Ocean Star family. I stand before you today, not just as your new CEO, but as someone who has worked quietly among you, learning valuable lessons." He paused meaningfully and continued, "My recent disguise as a humble cleaner taught me more about life, character, and human nature than any textbook could. True character is revealed when no one is watching. I observed kindness, humility, pride, and even arrogance firsthand." The staff listened intently. Some exchanged nervous glances. Kelvin smiled warmly. "I want you all to know that under my leadership, Ocean Star Enterprises will continue to grow with a strong foundation built on respect, honesty, hard work, and humility. We will expand our global reach, invest in new technology, and create opportunities for all who show true dedication, regardless of their background." There was a growing sense of admiration in the room. Taking a deep breath, Kelvin continued, "Today, I also wish to share a personal truth. During my time among you, I found something more valuable than any business deal or contract. I found genuine love." He turned slightly towards Abigail and smiled, his voice full of warmth. "I found someone who treated me with kindness when she thought I had nothing to offer. Abigail showed me true compassion and humility without knowing who I really was." The room buzzed with soft murmurs of surprise and admiration. It is with pride and gratitude that I tell you all that Abigail is the woman who captured my heart," Kelvin declared. Abigail blushed deeply, but Kelvin gently reached out and took her hand, raising it proudly. "Let our story be a reminder to everyone never look down on anyone because of their present situation. True greatness lies in humility, love, and integrity. The room erupted into thunderous applause, with many staff members smiling and clapping genuinely. Abigail looked into Kelvin's eyes, and at that moment, both knew their beautiful journey was just beginning. He took Abigail's hand gently amidst loud applause, their eyes meeting with deep, genuine affection. Kelvin softly whispered to Abigail, "From cleaner to CEO, thank you for loving me genuinely." She smiled warmly. "It's your heart that truly matters, not your position." Together they stood ready to begin a new life journey, grounded in mutual respect and genuine love.